Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I want to share a story that will break your heart and heal it at the same time. A story about a father who abandoned his disabled son at a lonely bus terminal and a stranger who found him and changed both their lives forever. It's a story of guilt, redemption, and the kind of love that doesn't come from blood, but from the heart. The sun dipped low over the cracked windows of Aba Central Bus Terminal, painting the world in that kind of burnt orange light that makes loneliness louder than silence. On one end of the wooden bench sat a little African boy, barely 3 years old, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. His name was Chinedu, and one of his small legs rested inside a metal brace hidden beneath his long socks. He hadn't moved for hours, just stared at the buses that came and went, whispering now and then, "Papa is coming soon, right?" He didn't know his father had walked away forever. Earlier that day, Obinna Okafor had driven there in his dusty blue Toyota, the back seat filled with bills, mechanic tools, and an almost empty bottle of beer rolling beneath the seat. He parked, turned off the engine, and sat in silence for a long minute before he forced a smile. "Chinedu," he said quietly, "you like buses, eh?" The boy nodded, his small voice bright. "Yes, Papa." "You want to go for a ride? Maybe to see big buildings?" Chinedu giggled, holding up his teddy bear as if it understood. "Teddy too?" "Yes, Teddy too," Obinna replied, his chest tight. But inside, guilt twisted him like a rope. He wasn't taking the boy anywhere. He had made his choice 2 nights before, after losing his last job at the garage. That night, he had watched his son sleeping, the leg brace beside the bed, and heard Amaka's voice echoing in his head. "He didn't ask for this life, Obinna. You protect him." But Amaka was gone. She had died giving birth to the same child who now looked at him like he was his whole world. Chinedu's leg had never worked right. The doctors said it was from lack of oxygen during birth. Amaka had bled too much, and they were forced to choose. They saved the baby. Obinna never forgave himself for agreeing. So that evening, when he led his son to the bus bench, he told him gently, "Wait here, my boy. Papa is just going to get our tickets." Chinedu nodded, trusting. "Okay." Then Obinna turned, walked past the ticket counter, and kept walking until the automatic doors swallowed him. He never looked back. Hours passed. The station grew quiet. Lights flickered on one by one. The last bus of the night pulled in, its headlights cutting through the dusty air. Behind the wheel sat Tunde Adebayo, a man whose expensive wristwatch and tired eyes didn't match the driver's uniform he wore. As passengers filed off, he noticed the little boy still sitting there alone. He frowned, stepped down, and said softly, "Hey, young man, where are your people?" Chinedu hugged his teddy tighter. "Papa went to buy tickets." Tunde looked around. No adult in sight, no bag, no ticket, just a half-empty juice box at the boy's feet, and a patient far too old for his years. "How long ago did he go?" Tunde asked. Chinedu thought hard, then pointed at the sky, when the sun was big. That had been hours ago. Tunde's throat tightened. He crouched down, meeting the child's eyes, brown, calm, and weary. The same eyes he once saw in his own son, Toby, who had died 2 years earlier from a sickness no amount of money could cure, the kind of loss that leaves a hole you never patch. "Do you know your name?" he asked softly. "Chinedu Okafor," the boy said. "And your papa's name?" "Obinna Okafor." Tunde nodded slowly, his voice thick. "Okay, Chinedu. Let's find someone to help, eh?" "Yes, sir." He led him to the ticket counter. The woman there shook her head. Nobody came to buy tickets under that name today. And that was when Tunde felt it, that heavy mix of anger and sorrow, when you realize cruelty sometimes hides behind despair. He pulled out his phone to call the police, but his hand trembled. He kept staring at the boy, thinking how he had spent years donating to children's hospitals, and now stood face to face with one small life no charity could fix. Chinedu tugged at his sleeve. "Uncle, is Papa angry with me?" Tunde knelt, fighting the lump in his throat. "No, my boy. He's just lost right now. Sometimes grown-ups get lost. Chinedu nodded, believing him, holding his teddy like it could explain the world. By the time the police arrived, the boy had fallen asleep in the waiting area. One officer whispered to Tunde, "We found a car abandoned near the old bridge, empty." Tunde looked at the horizon, the last bit of sun fading into darkness. He didn't know why he couldn't walk away. Maybe because he knew that look, the waiting for someone who'll never come. He touched the teddy still tucked in the boy's arms and whispered, "You don't deserve this, my son." When the police asked if he could stay until child services came, he said yes without thinking. He sat beside the boy until the last bus left, until the silence swallowed the station whole. What he didn't know then was that he wasn't just watching over a stranger's child. He was watching over the beginning of his own redemption. Morning crept over Aba Central Terminal in the color of pale steel, the kind that comes after a long night of rain. Chinedu was still asleep on the bench, his small chest rising gently against the teddy bear tucked under his chin. Tunde Adebayo had not moved from his side all night. His suit jacket was draped over the boy like a blanket. The police had promised to search for Obinna Okafor, but from the tone of their voices, Tunde could tell they had already written him off as another broken man who'd given up. When the social worker arrived, a tired-looking woman with a worn-out clipboard, she spoke softly, "Sir, thank you for staying. We'll take it from here." Tunde nodded, though something deep inside him resisted. He had seen too many systems like this swallow children whole. He looked down at Chinedu's face, peaceful, trusting, and asked quietly, "Can I visit him later?" "Of course," she replied, her voice carrying the emptiness of a promise she likely wouldn't keep. But Tunde did visit. 2 days later, he walked into the foster center, the smell of disinfectant and crayons filling the air. Chinedu sat at a small wooden table, drawing circles on a sheet of paper with a blunt pencil. His leg brace squeaked each time he moved, but he didn't complain. When Tunde knelt beside him, the boy's face lit up. "Busman?" he said happily. Tunde smiled. "You remember me?" Chinedu nodded and pointed at his paper. "Look, I'm making numbers." At first, they looked like random scribbles, but as Tunde looked closer, he realized they were perfect circles divided evenly, each one surrounded by tiny digits, repeating 7s and 3s, neat and deliberate. "What's this, my boy?" he asked gently. Chinedu tapped the paper. "Teddy said if you divide the big one into 3, you get forever 7s. Look." Tunde blinked. "You mean repeating decimals?" Chinedu shrugged. "Maybe." One of the attendants chuckled. "He's been doing that since he came. Doesn't talk much, but give him numbers and he won't stop." Tunde stared at the child, amazed. 3 years old, barely forming full sentences, yet scribbling what looked like mathematical patterns far beyond his age. Something stirred in Tunde's chest, a quiet thread, pulling him closer. That night, he called his lawyer. "Find Obinna Okafor," he said simply. It took a week. They found Obinna in a rundown motel on the outskirts of Enugu, drunk, hollow-eyed, and smelling of regret. When Tunde entered, Obinna looked up defensively. "You're here to judge me, rich man? You think I don't know what I did?" Tunde didn't raise his voice. "You left a child at a bus stop, Obinna, a child who can barely walk." Obinna slammed his beer can down. "You think I didn't try? You think I didn't love that boy? Every day he reminds me of what I lost. Amaka's blood was on that hospital floor and they told me to choose. I chose him. And she died. You know what that does to a man?" Tunde's jaw tightened. "Yes, I do." Obinna looked confused. Tunde's eyes softened, though his voice stayed sharp. "My son died, Obinna. A sickness I couldn't buy my way out of. I would give everything I have to hear him call me Papa again. But you had that, and you threw it away." For the first time, Obinna's anger melted into pain. He sank into his chair, shaking. "I didn't know what else to do." "Then learn," Tunde said quietly. "Because he's still waiting for you. Even now, he's waiting." Obinna couldn't meet his eyes. "I'm not the man he needs." Tunde nodded slowly. You're right, you're not, but I can be. A month later, the court hearing was held. Obina signed the papers silently without protest. Tunde didn't feel victorious, just responsible. Chinedu sat beside him, drawing invisible shapes on his palm, whispering numbers under his breath. When they walked out of the courthouse, the sun was high, warm on their faces. That afternoon, Tunde took him home. The big house that once echoed with grief began to fill again, with the squeak of a leg brace against marble floors, the tapping of crayons on tables, the soft hum of Chinedu counting stars by the window. Each evening, they sat together at the dining table. Chinedu solved puzzles faster than Tunde's old laptop could. Fractions, shapes, patterns, all flowed naturally to him. When Tunde asked how he knew all that, Chinedu answered simply, "I see patterns like songs in my head." Tunde watched him quietly, remembering how his own son had struggled with numbers. "You're something special, my boy," he whispered. Chinedu looked up and smiled. "Teddy says I'm just me." Somehow, that was enough. One cool evening, Tunde took him back to Aba Central Terminal. The same bench, the same fading light. Chinedu limped forward, placed his teddy bear gently on the seat, and said, "So other children don't feel lonely?" Tunde swallowed hard. "You sure?" Chinedu nodded. "Teddy is brave. He can wait." Tunde bent down, pulled the boy into his arms, and for the first time in years, the emptiness in his heart grew quiet. Weeks passed, and the story that began on a cold bus bench took a turn no one expected. Tunde Adebayo hadn't just brought Chinedu Okafor home. He had arranged for a full medical checkup. During the tests, the doctors noticed something unusual in the boy's brain scans. The parts of the brain responsible for logic and pattern recognition glowed with intensity far beyond the norm. When the final report came in, the neurologist looked astonished and whispered, "He's gifted, possibly a mathematical savant." Tunde sat silently, unable to speak, staring at the child humming softly beside him, drawing invisible shapes in the air with his fingers. The same boy the world had pitied as disabled and was solving complex arithmetic in his head before he could even read fluently. His leg had failed him, but his mind was a marvel. Yet, what truly shook Tunde wasn't the boy's brilliance, but what came next. When he opened the small box of belongings the foster home had kept, there was a folded letter addressed simply to anyone who finds him. It was written in clumsy, uneven handwriting. Inside, it read, "If anyone finds him, tell him I couldn't be the man he deserved, but maybe the man who can love him right will find him." The note was signed, Obina. Tunde read it again and again, his hands trembling. He realized then that Obina hadn't left out of cruelty alone. It was guilt, grief, and self-hatred that had driven him away. That night, Tunde drove back to the same rundown motel and sat in his car under the dim streetlight, the note shaking in his hands. He thought of all the men who had failed and wondered if redemption was still possible for any of them. When he finally returned home, the house was quiet. Chinedu was awake, sitting by the window, counting stars against the night sky. "How many are there, Chinedu?" Tunde asked softly. The boy turned his head, eyes reflecting the faint light, and said, "Too many to count, but I try every night." Tunde smiled faintly. "Then keep trying." At that moment, he understood. The miracle wasn't just the boy's mind, it was his heart, his will to keep counting, to keep hoping. A few weeks later, the story hit the local news. Bus stop boy finds a home and a future. The article spoke of how a retired businessman had adopted a physically challenged child abandoned at a terminal, and how the boy's unique gift for numbers had attracted the attention of university researchers. Cameras showed smiles and headlines spoke of miracles. But behind the bright words were quiet nights when Chinedu still woke up whispering, "Papa's coming soon." Each time, Tunde would gather him close, holding him against his chest and whisper, "He already did." And in those moments of silence, between guilt and grace, between loss and redemption, two broken souls found each other whole again. Chinedu, the boy the world left behind, and Tunde, the man who thought he had nothing left to give, became proof that love does not always come from where we expect. Sometimes blood may leave, but love stays. If this story touched your heart, remember that love and kindness can come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes family isn't just who we're born to, but who shows up when we need them most. Even in moments of despair, a single act of care can change a life forever. Let this story of Chinedu and Tunde remind us that miracles don't always make headlines. They happen quietly, through patience, understanding, and a heart willing to give. Share this story to inspire someone today, and let's keep spreading hope, love, and compassion in a world that desperately needs it. If this story touched your heart, share it to remind others that kindness still exists, even in the quiet corners of this world. Make sure you subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share with your friends and family so you don't miss the next powerful story coming your way. Drop a heart in comment, like and subscribe my channel, and visit my channel for more interesting stories videos.